Welcome to Create's Garda Vetting for the Arts training course. In this course, you will learn more about your responsibilities with regards Garda Vetting. You will also receive this information in a PDF document so that you can consult this information in future. What is vetting? There is a common misconception that going through the vetting process means that a person has automatically been approved to work with children and/or vulnerable people. This is incorrect. Vetting is not a judgment by the Garda National Vetting Bureau stating whether a person is suitable to work with children or vulnerable people or not. Vetting is a disclosure of information only. Vetting in Ireland is employer-led, meaning an employer, which in the Vetting Act is referred to as a relevant organisation, can vet a person they intend to engage in work deemed relevant under the Vetting Act. If an organisation is engaging a person in relevant work, whether as a traditional employee, a volunteer, or as a freelancer, the organisation is considered the employer of said person for vetting purposes. In order to engage a person in relevant work, an organisation must have this person undergo the vetting process, after which the organisation will receive and review the resulting vetting disclosure certificate. The organisation must then use the information disclosed in this certificate to decide whether the vetted person is suitable to carry out the relevant work with children or vulnerable people for which they are being employed. It must be noted that no person can be engaged in relevant work or activity until a vetting disclosure for that person has been officially received from the Garda National Vetting Bureau via Create. What do we mean by relevant work? As defined by the National Vetting Bureau Children and Vulnerable Persons Act 2012, relevant work is any work or activity, a necessary and regular part of which consists mainly of the person having access to or contact with children and/or vulnerable adults. For example, someone who is responsible for the care and supervision of children and/or vulnerable adults while teaching them in a class or workshop setting in an ongoing manner, i.e., not a one-off occasion. Role being vetted for. How to assess role validity. In order to assess whether the role you are engaging an employee in requires vetting, i.e. is relevant under the Vetting Act, the employing organisation must consider three things. Relevance. Does your employee carry out ongoing work or activity on more than a one-off basis, wherein a necessary part consists mainly of them having access to or contact with the same children or vulnerable people while carrying out the work you are employing them for? For example, if they are providing care and supervision to children backstage and during rehearsals for a month-long stage production, this role would require vetting. However, if they are rehearsing with and performing alongside children during a film production, but are not alone with the children or responsible for their care, as the children are supervised at all times by their parent or another vetted person, this role would not require vetting. Regular contact. Is the contact the employee has with a child or vulnerable person ongoing, i.e. more than a one-off? Does the work involve regular ongoing contact between the employee and a particular child or children or vulnerable person or people? For example, if your employee is providing workshops to children on a one-off basis, there is no reason to vet the employee. However, if the workshops are ongoing with the same children, then vetting may be required. Incidental contact. Is the contact your employee has with children or vulnerable people merely incidental to the work you are engaging them in? For example, on a TV or film set, a camera operator or costumer may have contact with a child performer and may even have physical interaction with the child on a regular basis. But if the child is supervised at all times by a vetted chaperone, then the work does not fall under the Act and cannot be vetted for. Role compatibility with the Act. The employee being vetted is referred to as the vetting subject. They are required to provide sufficient detail and context in the role being vetted for field of the NVB1 form. Applicants must clearly state specific details and context on how they work with and/or provide care and supervision for the same children or vulnerable people in an ongoing fashion. Vetting subjects must make sure to mention either children or vulnerable people in the description of the role being vetted for. It is the employer's responsibility to ensure that sufficient detail has been included. The role being vetted for must be clearly stated. Generic terms such as volunteer will not suffice. The Garda National Vetting Bureau have limited the character count to 120 characters, including spaces. As such, the applicant's role description must be a maximum of 120 characters. An example of an acceptable role description is as follows. Teaching children speech and drama in a week-long camp environment. This example clearly shows that the vetting subject will be working with children in a position of responsibility in an environment that is considered relevant under the Act, i.e. an ongoing situation. Need versus right. There are two main considerations regarding vetting. The first, and most obvious, is child protection. The second is the right to privacy of the person the employer is intending to vet. An organisation engaging someone in work, employer, must be sure they have a need to vet an individual, employee, before they have any right to do so. Please bear in mind that if a vetting subject's intended work is not considered relevant, the employer has no need to have them vetted and therefore no right to have them vetted. To ascertain whether an employer has a need to vet someone, that employer must look at the type of work they intend the employee to carry out from the three different points of view outlined above. Is the work regular, relevant, or incidental? If the contact with a child or vulnerable person is merely incidental, then the work does not fall under the Vetting Act, and the employer has no right to vet the employee. The employer must be confident that the role being vetted for is relevant and has regular contact, as defined above, before submitting any vetting request. ID and proof of address validation. It is a requirement for all organisations to validate the identity of the person they intend to put through the vetting process. This is to protect all those involved and ensure the correct individual is being vetted. In order to do so, an employee within the organisation who has successfully undergone this training, known as a validator, must validate the vetting subject's identity documents in person. The validator must physically see the documents to ensure they are original, within date, and that the identity of the vetting subject matches the documents. 2 documents must be validated for each vetting subject, one to support identification and one to support proof of address. A comprehensive list of accepted proof of identity and address documents is provided on our website and also issued via email to the designated contact person who manages vetting within your organisation. It can also be found on the PDF accompanying this training. Steps for validating documents. The validator, in the presence of the vetting subject, must see the physical original proof of ID document, i.e. passport or driver's licence. They must review said document to ensure the photograph matches the vetting subject and ensure the document is valid, i.e. currently in date. The validator must then make a copy of the proof document, scan or photograph. They must print out this copy and then sign and date it in ballpoint pen in the presence of the vetting subject. This is to keep record or proof of when the documents were reviewed. The validator must then do the same for the proof of address document, i.e. bank statement or utility bill, or correspondence directly from a government department. They must review said document, ensuring it has all required pieces of information included. A valid proof of address document must be on letterhead of the issuing organisation or government department, have the full name and address of the vetting subject, have an issuing date no more than 6 months or 180 days old at the time of review. The validator must make a copy of this proof of address document, scan or photograph. They must then print out said copy, then sign and date it in ballpoint pen in the presence of the vetting subject. The validator must then complete an ID validation form as provided to your organisation for the vetting subject in question. Each section of this ID validation form, except for the Your Ref box at the top right corner, must be completed. For example, in Section 4, Document Confirmation field, the validator must input a document reference number. In the case of a passport, this is a passport number. In the case of a driver's licence, it is the licence number. Forms with sections left incomplete are deemed invalid. The image quality of all document copies must be clear and legible in order to be considered valid. NVB1 form. The NVB1 form is crucial for the vetting process, and it must be thoroughly reviewed for accuracy, legibility, and completion. All information stated on the NVB1 form must be clear and unambiguous. The vetting subject's given name and address, as stated on the NVB1 form, must match the proof of ID and proof of address documents exactly. The vetting subject must include a valid email address and phone number for processing purposes. The name of organisation field must be completed and match the name of the employer organisation as registered with this vetting service. The vetting subject must tick the consent box above the signature field, stating that they have provided sufficient proofs of ID and address to you as validator, and that they consent for the Garda National Vetting Bureau to carry out the vetting process and provide the resulting vetting disclosure certificate to this specific employer. Finally, the applicant must sign and date the paper copy of the NVB1 form in ballpoint pen only. Digital signatures of any kind, including DocuSign or signing via an iPad, are not acceptable. Document retention. Your organisation must retain the original completed NVB1 form and ID validation form, as well as validated copies of the proof of ID and proof of address documents. These documents must be kept on file by the employer organisation in a safe and secure place for a period of 12 months. This is in the event the Garda National Vetting Bureau carry out an on-site spot check. Each person in your organisation who has successfully completed this training video and its accompanying quiz will be permitted to be a validator of ID documents. Please consult the accompanying PDF document if you wish to review certain aspects of the training. Your organisation's designated contact person is invited to contact Create's vetting service with specific questions if required. This is the end of Create's Vetting for the Arts training video.